The sun was burning low in the Californian sky when the gang of bikers rolled into the gas station, their engines roaring like thunder. Their leather jackets carried patches that screamed danger, and the way they laughed, loud and carelessly, made the place feel instantly unsafe. Families filling up their cars turned their heads away, hoping not to attract attention. Among the group, one biker stood out, a tall, heavily tattooed man with a cruel sneer plastered across his face. His presence alone made people shift uncomfortably, as if he was searching for something, or someone, to torment. As the bikers parked, their boots clanked heavily against the concrete, and the air filled with the smell of gasoline and cigarette smoke. That's when the tattooed biker noticed it, a small brown dog, no bigger than a sack of flour, sitting patiently near the corner of the station. Its tail wagged softly, as if it believed every person was a friend, every stranger a possible companion. The dog had been quietly minding its own business, waiting with an innocent glow in its eyes that only animals possess. But to the biker, that purity was nothing more than a target. He walked toward it slowly, his steps deliberate, almost theatrical, as if he wanted to make sure people were watching. The crowd sensed trouble but stayed frozen, uncertain whether to intervene. The dog tilted its head, still wagging its tail, completely unaware of the cruelty about to strike. Then, without hesitation, the biker lifted his heavy steel-toed boot and swung it hard. The sound of the impact echoed, sharp and brutal, as the poor animal yelped in pain and tumbled across the pavement. Gasps erupted from onlookers, but no one dared move. The dog whimpered, dragging itself up on shaky legs, its eyes wide with confusion. It didn't understand why it had been attacked. It had done nothing wrong. For a split second, the world seemed to stand still, the dog's cry cutting through the air like glass. Yet the biker only laughed, his raspy voice filled with pride at his own cruelty. His gang joined in, slapping their knees, hollering like it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. Their laughter drowned out the gas station's natural noises, turning the place into a stage for their mockery. Some bystanders tried to look away, too horrified to watch further. A mother pulled her child close, shielding his eyes. An old man muttered angrily under his breath but didn't step forward. Fear wrapped around everyone like chains, keeping them in place. And there the biker stood, victorious in his own twisted mind, basking in the attention his cruel act had gathered. He spat on the ground, smirking as if daring anyone to challenge him. The little dog trembled, its tail no longer wagging. As the poor animal struggled back to its paws, several people noticed something unusual about it. Unlike the mangy strays often seen wandering around gas stations, this dog was different. Its coat was smooth and well-groomed, shining under the late afternoon sun despite the dust it had picked up from the fall. Its ears perked with alertness, and there was intelligence in its eyes. Something almost human in the way it scanned the crowd. This was not an ordinary dog abandoned on the roadside. It clearly belonged to someone who cared for it deeply. Around its neck rested a thick, black leather collar, polished and sturdy, nothing like the flimsy straps strays were sometimes tied with. Hanging from the collar was a sleek, metallic tag that caught the light every time the dog moved. Curious eyes from the crowd caught a glimpse of it, but instead of a name, there was only a single elegant engraving, the letter K. The rest of the tag appeared scratched or worn out, as though someone had deliberately erased the details that once revealed the dog's identity. This single clue raised silent questions in the minds of those who noticed. Who was K? Why had the name been removed? The dog itself seemed to carry an aura that didn't belong in such a violent scene. Even as it trembled from the cruel kick, it didn't lash out or growl. Instead, it held its composure, almost as though it was trained to endure pain without striking back. That kind of behavior didn't come from the streets. It came from discipline, patience, and hours of careful handling. To some, the way the dog carried itself felt eerily familiar, as if they had seen animals like this in movies, or under the care of someone important. Meanwhile, the biker who had attacked it sneered at the shiny collar, mocking, "Look at that. Someone actually treats this mutt like it's worth something." He picked up a can from the ground and tossed it near the animal, laughing when it flinched. But what he didn't notice was how quiet the crowd had suddenly become. People weren't just staring at the injured dog anymore. They were staring at the mysterious collar, and at the unanswered questions it represented. Even in its suffering, the dog tried to stand tall, limping slightly as it lifted its head toward the gas station doors, almost as if waiting for someone. The letter K on its collar gleamed in the fading light, and those who saw it felt an odd chill travel down their spines. This was no random pet. This dog belonged to someone who might not be far away, and whoever that person was, the ruthless biker had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Amid the chaos and jeers of the bikers, one figure stood apart from the crowd. He was quiet, almost unnoticeable at first glance, wearing a black baseball cap pulled low over his face and dark sunglasses that reflected the glaring sun. He had parked his motorcycle a few feet away, casually pumping gas, pretending to mind his own business. Yet there was something about the way he held himself, calm, controlled, every movement deliberate, that made him impossible to ignore once you noticed him. His presence exuded a quiet authority, the kind that makes even the boldest troublemakers hesitate for a moment. The bikers were too wrapped up in their own laughter to notice him immediately. They were mocking the dog, cheering at every yelp and whimper, feeling invincible in their cruelty. But the stranger's gaze never wavered. His eyes, hidden behind the dark lenses, were locked onto the dog and the biker who had kicked it. There was no panic, no anger on his face, only an intense, measured focus. It was the kind of focus that suggested he had seen far worse, but knew this act of cruelty could not go unanswered. A subtle tension began to ripple through the crowd. Onlookers, who had been frozen by fear or disbelief, now sensed that something was shifting in the air. The biker who had just kicked the dog noticed the stranger for the first time and scoffed, thinking him insignificant, a quiet old man who wouldn't interfere. He even waved a hand mockingly, daring the stranger to step in. But the man didn't react. Instead, he continued his slow, meticulous movements, finishing pumping his gas and gently closing the nozzle, as though he had all the time in the world. Then, without a word, he walked toward the fallen dog. Every step was calm, precise, and filled with a strange intensity that made those nearby instinctively step back. The dog, sensing something, lifted its head slightly, its eyes meeting the stranger's. In that moment, there was a silent connection, a reassurance that help had arrived. The stranger knelt down, moving slowly so as not to scare the animal, and brushed dirt from its fur with careful, deliberate motions. His hands were gentle but firm, and there was a sense of authority in the way he handled the dog that commanded respect. The biker's laughter faltered, replaced by unease. He had expected the scene to end with everyone intimidated by him, yet the stranger's calm presence created a new tension, one that the biker couldn't quite understand. The crowd, too, watched in astonishment as the man cared for the dog without raising his voice or making a scene. Something about the stranger felt different. He wasn't here by accident, and he wasn't someone who would simply stand by while cruelty went unpunished. A chilling question hung in the air: who was this man, and what would he do next? The atmosphere at the gas station shifted dramatically. The biker who had just kicked the dog took a swig from his beer, trying to regain his bravado, but a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. The stranger's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the biker's chaotic energy, and for the first time, the man realized he was being watched, not with fear, but with a quiet, controlled intensity that demanded attention. Every laugh, every joke, now felt hollow, overshadowed by the presence of someone who clearly did not tolerate cruelty. The biker stepped closer to the stranger, smirking, and yelled, "Hey, old man! That mutt yours. Better keep it on a leash before someone finishes the job." His voice was loud, meant to dominate the space, but it had the opposite effect. The crowd tensed. People held their breath, sensing that the joke had gone too far, that the stranger's patience was not infinite. His movements remained deliberate, almost predatory in their calmness, as he slowly reached for the dog. It was a warning in itself. No words needed. Some onlookers noticed subtle keys. The stranger's jaw tightened slightly, a hand brushed against his jacket pocket, as if preparing for something unseen, and his shoulders squared in a way that suggested readiness. There was no need for theatrics. Every muscle in his body spoke louder than words ever could. The biker, oblivious to these warning signs, laughed nervously and tried to assert dominance, unaware that he was standing on the edge of a line that should never be crossed. The dog, still trembling but now under the stranger's protective presence, seemed to sense the tension as well. It lowered its body slightly, pressing close to the man's legs, as if signaling, "This person is different, trust him." The biker's laughter wavered. He glanced around at the small crowd, realizing that people were watching him differently now. The mocking energy that had fueled his earlier cruelty was fading, replaced by a collective unease that made him shift his weight nervously. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The stranger lifted his head, his gaze locking with the biker's. There was no overt threat, no raised voice, but the message was clear: cruelty would not go unchallenged. A heavy silence fell over the gas station, broken only by the dog's soft whimpers. Everyone could feel the weight of the unspoken warning, a tense prelude to something far greater that had yet to unfold. The stranger finally reached down, gently lifting the trembling dog into his arms. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if every action was being measured for maximum impact. The bikers exchanged nervous glances, feeling the shift in power but not yet understanding its source. Then, the man removed his sunglasses, and the late afternoon sun caught his face. In an instant, the entire gas station seemed to stop breathing. Shock rippled through the crowd. Everyone recognized him. It was Keanu Reeves. The biker who had kicked the dog froze mid-laugh, his smirk vanishing as disbelief washed over him. This wasn't some random bystander or a quiet old man. It was Keanu Reeves, one of the most famous actors in the world. Known for his calm demeanor, his kindness, and his love for animals, he had the kind of presence that could silence an entire room without raising his voice. And now, standing mere feet away, holding the dog that he had just harmed, Keanu's aura was both terrifying and commanding. The other bikers began to sense the gravity of the situation. Their laughter had died completely, replaced by murmurs of fear and regret. They hadn't just harmed a stray, they had harmed Keanu Reeves' dog, an extension of the man himself. The engraved K on the dog's collar suddenly made sense, and the stakes became clear. Any attempt at arrogance or defiance now felt dangerously naive. The celebrity before them was no ordinary person. They had underestimated him completely. Keanu's eyes, calm yet piercing, scanned each biker in turn. There was no need for words. The silent intensity of his gaze spoke volumes. It was as if he could see every thought running through their minds, their bravado, their fear, their panic, and weigh it all against the simple, immutable truth that cruelty was unacceptable. The dog, secure now in his arms, looked up at him with a mix of relief and trust, as though acknowledging that its protector had finally arrived. Even the bystanders felt the tension escalate. Phones were raised, whispers spread, but nobody dared speak. There was a collective understanding that something monumental was unfolding. The bikers, who had moments ago felt invincible, now realized that they were facing far more than a simple reprimand. Keanu Reeves had appeared quietly, almost mysteriously, and in that silence, he held absolute authority. The revelation wasn't just that he was here. It was that the world had just shifted for everyone standing there. Keanu Reeves didn't yell. He didn't throw a punch. Instead, he walked slowly toward the biker, each step measured and deliberate, the dog safely cradled in his arms. The roar of engines and chatter of the gas station seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the heavy thrum of tension that only his presence could create. The biker's smirk wavered as he realized that the quiet, controlled man approaching him was nothing like anyone he had encountered before. Every step Keanu took seemed to carry weight, as if the ground itself recognized the authority he projected. The biker attempted to laugh it off, raising his hands and saying, "Relax, man. It was just a joke." But the words fell flat, hollow against the oppressive silence surrounding Keanu. His gaze locked on the biker's eyes, unwavering and intense, sending a shiver down the man's spine. There was no need for threats or theatrics. The sheer intensity of Keanu's stare was enough to communicate an unspoken warning. There are consequences for cruelty, and they will not be ignored. The crowd, sensing the tension, instinctively backed away, giving Keanu and the biker a wide berth. The biker shifted nervously, sweat forming along his hairline, realizing that his previous confidence had been an illusion. He had underestimated not just the man's fame, but the strength of his character. The quiet, unshakable authority that comes from a lifetime of integrity and kindness. The air itself seemed heavier, as if charging the space with an energy that demanded respect and fear in equal measure. Keanu lowered the dog gently to the ground, kneeling slightly to let it regain its footing. Even this movement was deliberate, nothing about him was hurried or uncontrolled. The dog stood, brushing its fur against Keanu's leg, a silent signal that it trusted him completely. That simple display of trust amplified the reckoning, making the biker realize that the man in front of him was not just a celebrity. He was a protector. He had seen cruelty firsthand and had the resolve to confront it without losing control. Finally, Keanu spoke, his voice calm yet chilling in its intensity. "Hurting the innocent is never a joke." Every word landed with precision, echoing in the stunned silence around the gas station. The biker's bravado crumbled, replaced by genuine fear and regret. The other bikers, witnessing the scene, instinctively stepped back, their earlier laughter gone. It was clear that the reckoning had begun, not with violence, but with the undeniable weight of authority and moral clarity that demanded acknowledgement, respect, and immediate contrition. The gas station remained eerily quiet after Keanu Reeves had delivered his warning. The biker who had kicked the dog stood frozen, staring at the actor with wide eyes, trying to comprehend what had just occurred. The bravado that had filled him only moments ago had evaporated completely, leaving behind a mix of fear, shame, and disbelief. His gang too shuffled nervously, unsure whether to leave, apologize, or simply stand there in silent terror. The once chaotic scene now resembled a stage frozen in time, with Keanu at its center. the dog, still trembling slightly, nestled closer to Keanu, as if to absorb the calm yet commanding energy he exuded. Onlookers noticed the bond between man and animal, and it left a lasting impression. The little dog, who had been treated with such cruelty moments before, was now safe and protected. Its eyes, full of trust and relief, seemed to tell the story more vividly than words ever could. Witnesses felt an unusual shiver run down their spines, sensing that this wasn't just an ordinary confrontation, it was a moment that would linger in memory for years to come. As Keanu prepared to leave, the bikers didn't make a sound. Their motorcycles stood idly, engines now silent, their earlier arrogance completely replaced by a newfound humility. Some muttered weak apologies, but Keanu gave them nothing more than a measured glance, letting the weight of the encounter speak for itself. The fear that gripped them wasn't born out of threat. It was born out of the understanding that actions have consequences, and that some individuals are far more powerful than they appear. People in the gas station began whispering, exchanging stories and recounting every detail. Phones clicked quietly as a few witnesses captured the event, trying to process that they had just witnessed something extraordinary. The narrative spreading quickly wasn't about fame or celebrity, it was about justice, integrity, and the courage to protect the innocent. Keanu Reeves had arrived quietly, acted decisively, and left a lesson that no one present would ever forget. Even after he rode away, the energy of the event lingered like a heavy fog. The bikers, once loud and dominating, now moved cautiously, hesitant to speak or act rashly. The crowd remained clustered, replaying the moment over and over in their minds, trying to understand how one calm, measured man could shift the power dynamics so completely. The dog, safe and content, trotted beside its owner, signaling the end of immediate danger. But the memory of the reckoning, the fear, and the sudden shift in authority would continue to haunt everyone at the station, long after the engines had faded into the distance. As Keanu Reeves rode off into the fading sunlight, the little dog safely by his side, the gas station seemed to exhale. The bikers remained frozen, a mix of fear and awe rooting them in place, while the witnesses slowly realized they had seen more than a confrontation. They had witnessed justice delivered silently, powerfully, and without a single word raised in anger. The lesson was clear: cruelty can strike anyone, anywhere, but sometimes the universe sends a protector when you least expect it. And for those who dared to harm the innocent, the memory of that calm, unyielding gaze, the quiet strength, and the unwavering moral courage would linger forever, a haunting reminder that true power doesn't roar, it watches, waits, and acts when necessary. And as the engine's roar faded into the horizon, one thought remained in the minds of everyone who had witnessed it: never underestimate the quiet ones, because sometimes the quietest people carry the heaviest justice.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.